So a little bit about me before we begin. My name is Caity. I'm a dietitian or accredited practicing dietitian from OnCore Nutrition. We work outside of the Caity clinic in South Melbourne, so I'm here on Tuesdays. So today we're going to be talking about pimping your trolley. And I guess to give you a little bit of background on that, the idea is that I'm going to give you some really practical advice around how to tackle shopping at the moment, which, look, as you all, I'm sure, can be a little bit nerve-wracking, especially in the current climate. So at OnCore Nutrition, we're passionate about building a community around credible and evidence-based info with people that you can trust to turn to for sound advice. So whilst every man and their dog has an opinion about nutrition, today I'm here to cut through some of the myths, dish out some facts, and help tailor your plate to be the best to you. Okay, so we're about to take a tour through our local supermarket. We're going to be making stops in a couple of the shelves, not everything, but hopefully at the end we'll have plenty of time for questions, and then we'll even maybe be able to pop over to BWS and have a bit of a look there too. So along the way of our tour, we are going to be using these symbols. So just to give you a little bit of a breakdown, these symbols are used because at OnCore we don't like good foods and bad foods. We think those terms aren't useful in the overall context of our health. So instead, look out for these on the slides that I put up. So it ranges from things like approach with caution, so not on an empty stomach. The food might be loaded with great gut bacteria, important for heart health, things that we just really love, or trolley stars. So they're essentially the things from OnCore that we give a gold star to and say that pop it into your trolley and enjoy. Now, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to pop them in the chat box, and then we'll go through that at the end, and I'm very happy to take any questions and have a bit of a chat about what we've spoken about as well. So it is no accident that when you go into a supermarket, the first thing that you step foot into is the bakery. So beautiful waft of croissants or pain au chocolat or bickies or breads, all of that stuff is designed with the idea that will hopefully cause you to buy a few extra products. So shopping this aisle on an empty stomach can be a bit tricky because you know, as I mentioned, they've got all of those beautiful baked goods. You might walk in and instead of coming out with toothpaste, you might have a pack of 12 croissants, some fruit cake, crusty baguette, some bickies as well, all things that perhaps you didn't exactly go in to buy. So you'll be aware that these treats are quite high in refined sugars and processed or trans fats. So trans fats particularly are one thing that make this aisle a little bit something to be a little bit wary about. So trans fats are things that are commercially manufactured to act in the same way as saturated fat. So what that means is they have a really great mouthfeel, so they are just like butter and actually melt in your mouth. And they're also cheap and last really well on the shelves. So great return from the supermarket, but unfortunately in terms of our health can be a little bit of a risk in the long term. So the other things that we consider, I guess, with trans fats are chronic disease conditions. So diabetes, some cancers, different things like that we all want to minimize. So approach this aisle with caution, pop your head up high, maybe don't hit this aisle on an empty stomach, and also maybe take a supportive loved one with you. Next, let's talk about bread. So I don't know about you guys, but there've been many a time when I have gone into a supermarket and just stood aghast in front of all of these loaves of bread. There's multigrain, white, wholemeal, gluten-free, you name it, it's there nowadays. So first of all, the good news is that you do not have to cut carbs. We know that carbohydrates are a really good source of energy within our diet, but it's more about the varieties that we're picking and what we're choosing to enjoy the most often. The next thing to consider when we're looking at carbohydrates is the glycemic index. So the glycemic index is the amount of time it takes for food to go into your bloodstream and have a reaction. So here, I'm just going to use my mouse to show you we've got blood glucose levels on the y-axis and time on the x. So if you're having foods that are high GI, they cause a rapid rise in our blood sugar, and then this plateau will fall. Whereas we can see if we're enjoying things that are low GI, so that's 55 or less, we have a more gradual sustained release of that sugar or energy. So I'm telling you this because it's important to be choosing low glycemic index products more often than not. So next, let's jump into bread types, which is a question I get asked all the time. So let's differentiate. We've got white bread here, which is just the plain milled wheat. Chuck in a handful of seeds, we've got a multigrain. Up in this corner, we've got wholemeal, which is the whole grain wheat milled. And then if you pop seeds into that, we have a lovely whole grain bread here. So in terms of the glycemic index, we see that white is the highest, and then our whole grain bread would be the lowest. Next, let's talk rice. So in terms of rice, we tend to think of it as a little bit of a vehicle. So a really important vessel for the good stuff, but probably not something that you would sit down and eat a full meal of by itself. So, you know, we think curries, sashimi, all of those delicious meals that we accompany with rice. So in terms of the nutrient content of rice itself, it doesn't have too much in the way, apart from, sorry, I'm just jumping into the questions. I can see we've got a UK supermarket too. Great. So in terms of rice, it has great carbs, you know, great source of energy. But apart from that, in terms of our protein or our other micronutrients, there are some other good choices that we can have a bit of a look at. So in terms of those choices, if we think about the glycemic index that we were talking about before, if we want something that's lower on the glycemic index, we would be looking at our brown rice, our basmati rice is really good. However, on the other hand, as I said at the start, we don't believe in good and bad in OnCore. So if you love rice, that's great, and we just recommend looking at the portion sizes that you're having. So usually we tend to look at about a fist size amount as one portion, and then include a fist size amount of protein to, you know, balance that nicely. And in addition to that, we recommend having lots of different colors of fruit and veg on the side to round out your meal. So let's journey on. To have a little bit of a chat about some other types of grains. So as I said, if rice is your thing, absolutely go for it. But if you were looking for something with a little bit greater bang for your buck in terms of nutrition, we could look at some quinoa, some freekeh, millet, bulgur wheat is a really good one as well, all of which have a little bit more protein, some of those micronutrients that are really great for our health, and offer some really good food for all of the gut bacteria within our bodies. Okay, so next, the cereals aisle. Now, cereals themselves are not bad at all. This aisle actually can have some really great options. But I guess the thing that I want to talk to you about here is ensuring that we're picking something that's going to keep you fueled for a good amount of time. So often we find that with cereals, you know, you can enjoy it for brekkie, and then an hour or two later, you might be starving again. And the idea is, instead of enjoying those brekkies, why don't we make it a little bit more substantial so that you're feeling fuller for longer, and jumping back to the glycemic index, we're keeping our blood sugar nice and stable. So some recommendations we have around brekkie are to add a little bit of veg. So if we think about it, ordinarily we try and squish all of our vegetable requirements into lunch or dinner, which, to be honest, is pretty tricky. So the idea is opening up that brekkie, thinking about how we can add lots of color and enjoyment to our plate with, you know, mushrooms on toast, baked eggs with capsicum and tomato, or even adding things like zucchini or carrot to your muesli. So if you think about it in the way that if you can make it into a cake, why not make it into a muesli? If you're feeling a bit adventurous there. So speaking of mueslis, they can be a little bit tricky in terms of what they, all the ingredients that they have. So I don't know about you, but when I see that brown packaging, you know, an organic label, few health claims about like good fats and high fiber, and a hefty organic price tag, I certainly get that health halo effect of thinking, oh, well, that must be good. However, this doesn't always mean that that food will be the best choice for us. So a couple of things to be wary of. If the muesli says toasted, that usually means that it's been cooked in a canola oil, so it can just add a little bit of extra fat there. Mueslis can be jam-packed full of nuts and seeds, which really, really are good for you, but are a little bit higher on the energy side. So if that's a consideration for you, it's important to kind of change the ratio there. In terms of other things that we think about with mueslis or granolas, added coconut oil, more dried fruit than you usually have, or any of those sugar aliases like honey, agave, nectar, syrups are all things to enjoy in moderation. So our recommendation or tip for our clients is usually to jump into this aisle, go grab a lovely big bag of rolled oats, and then pick and choose according to your taste. So go find some whole fruit, so even grated apple could be really lovely, you know, grated carrot if you're feeling risque, pop in some sprinkled nuts, some seeds, maybe some dried fruit, a dollop of yogurt and your preferred milk, and you've got a beautiful breakfast completely tailored to your taste and enjoyment, but also you've probably saved yourself about $4 a bag, so all around a good time. So let's journey on. Next, we are going to jump into our fruit and veg section. So as you can see from the bottom, really great for our gut. Really important for our health, heart health, and fruit and veg. I'm sure you're not surprised, is something that we really highly recommend you pop in your basket. You really can't overdo this aisle, from benefits for heart health, overall health, lower blood sugar, better cholesterols, weight management, keeping you fuller for longer, feeding our gut health, all of these things. All of these fruit and veg can play a really good part in our diet as well. I guess the only thing to consider here is looking at the types of veggies you're having. So there are essentially two types of veggies. We've got starchy and non-starchy. Starchy veg are higher on the carbs, so that's again something that we're considering portion sizes in the greater context of our diet. So starchy veg include potatoes, sweet potato, peas, corn, pumpkin, legumes, pulses, all of those good things. So when you're building your meals, we recommend kind of treating these foods a little bit like, you know, your pasta or your rice, and building your meals in a balanced way around that as well. Something else that I've already mentioned is organic. So another big question that we get asked in clinic is, do I have to eat organic food to have a healthy diet? Look, there's a huge debate and growing interest in this. And, you know, some research does say that perhaps organic food could be more nutritious, or there might be less chemicals produced in it. However, it's really easy to kind of cherry pick scientific information. So when we look at the full picture of the literature currently, we find that there's not really a significant difference between those who eat organic to those who eat regular food. The thing that we do find to be different is around those populations. So people who eat organic, usually in a higher SES bracket, are better educated, exercise more, go to the doctor regularly, get health screens, treat conditions early. So they're already doing a lot of those health promoting behaviors. So that's why in the literature, it's really difficult to quite differentiate whether it's down to just the organic food or whether it's perhaps more just their overall lifestyle. So I guess moral of the story is If you have the means for it, there's no, you're welcome to choose organic food. However, there's not the research to back up that it's definitely better than regular food. So if you, if you can't afford it and just prefer to have standard produce, then enjoying a really wide variety of that is what we would recommend. So traveling on, we're going to jump into our fruit. Now, I'm sure that some of you will have heard the saying, eat the rainbow. And the idea with this is that we're consuming lots of different phytonutrients from all of the different colours across that spectrum. The different vibrant colours are a real array of the antioxidants, vitamins, minerals that are contained within them. So really, really great for us. These fruits will keep our bodies healthy, our cells healthy, also contribute to a better overall profile for things like heart disease, cancer, neurological conditions, and can even help reduce the signs of aging. So if you think about that vitamin E or vitamin A cream that you've been diligently popping on your face every day for the last 10 years, they're also both antioxidants. So same thing there. The other thing is we're really big fans at OnCore of the skins and the seeds in fruit. So we know that a lot of the good nutrients are contained in those. So unless you have another another health condition that requires you to peel them, we'd love for you to keep them on, just give them a good scrub. So the other thing to note with that, the skins and the seeds of fruits and veggies, is they're really, really great for our gut health. So we know there's a really clear relationship between our mind and our gut. It's actually called the mind-gut axis. And we know if we keep our gut healthy and thriving and all of the bacteria within there, we can also keep our mind healthy and thriving. And it also kind of works vice versa. So keeping our mind healthy and thriving has that effect on our gut. So in terms of recommendations for fruit, we say 2 a day, looking for variety, so enjoying a number of different fruits, and then also looking for things that are in season is really good as well. So let's travel on. Now we are heading on to the next aisle that can cause a little bit of confusion. So dairy. Again, another thing that I often get asked about, is it okay if I have cow's milk, or should I be having almond milk, or all of this kind of stuff. So in terms of our dairy recommendations, we need to be thinking about the overall health profile. And if we look at the literature, we can see that full fat dairy especially is linked to a lower risk of heart disease. It's linked with better outcomes for weight management, and a whole host of different things. So there's certainly no reason, unless you have an intolerance, to avoid dairy, and it can actually be something that is really health promoting. Particularly with bone health, a lot of people have the misconception that consuming dairy can be a negative thing for the calcium within our bones, but we actually know that there's a really good amount of literature to say that it's really supportive in ensuring that we reduce our risk of osteoporosis and that kind of thing as well. In terms of full versus skim, again, there's not too much of a difference. The real thing we're looking at here is just the concentration of fat. So there's nothing added, there's no added sugar or anything like that to skim milk. So really, in deciding what's best for you, it's really personal, very variable, but either option, provided there's no background intolerances, could be good. So speaking of intolerances, let's talk milk alternatives. A field that I think has absolutely skyrocketed, especially in the last couple of years. We've got oat milk, almond milk, soy, rice, I even saw pea protein the other day. So lots of different options, and can be pretty confusing as to what we should be having. So we know that soy milk has a really similar nutrient composition to our cow's milk. And it's also governed by some food standards to ensure that it has appropriate amounts of calcium and can be called a milk on the packaging. So soy milk can be a really good option. The thing to look out for with soy milk is the sugar. So sometimes there can be a little bit of extra added sugar there to consider. The next one we usually talk about is almond milk. So pretty low in kilojoules, protein, fat, doesn't usually have a lot of calcium, which can be tricky. And also can be sweetened with sugar, so something to look out for. Rice milk, so again, low in energy, not really providing much in the way of protein, doesn't have a lot of added sugar usually, but can have a little bit of natural sugar. But rice milk is actually hypoallergenic, so it can be really good for people who have that intolerance to dairy, but then also have issues around nuts and different things that are commonly made into those plant-based milks. Coconut milk is another one that we talk about. So low in carbs and kilojoules, but very high in saturated fat. So can be a bit tricky to work with in our diet. Also pretty low in protein and calcium. So yeah, it can be a enjoyable option, but probably not something that we'd recommend in the everyday. So in terms of the next dairy product that we are going to have a bit of a chat about, let's talk yogurt, which can be a bit of a hot button topic in terms of should it be low fat, should I be watching the sugar, all of that kind of stuff. So as I mentioned before, there are studies to illustrate that dairy, and particularly things that are full cream, can actually be really good for our heart health and overall health. So choosing yogurt or kefir, which is like a drinking yogurt, can be really valuable for our overall, but also our gut health. So when choosing yogurt, I'd really encourage you to have a bit of a look on the label. So we can see with this slide, we've got this yogurt, which has a couple more different options, a couple more different ingredients. It's also perhaps got some ingredients that are stabilizers and things that might not be immediately recognizable. In contrast, we can see with this yogurt, it's got a couple of ingredients, all things that are recognizable. And in terms of the nutrients here, we can see a little bit more protein, better sugars, the sodium's about half, calcium's a little bit less, but all things to consider. So from our perspective, both of these yogurts could be enjoyed within your diet, but the idea is that we're probably choosing this one a little bit more often than this one to support our overall health. So moving on from yogurt, we are going to jump into meat, which can be another hot button topic. So meat, there's no reason to avoid it within our diet. It's high in protein and high in iron, but there are some recommendations that we have around meat. So in terms of red meat, we look at around 500 grams or less per week. And that's because, as you can see on this diagram, it's been shown to have probable causes or to increase the risk of cancer later in life. So we recommend reducing it to, 500 grams or less per week. And these red meats include things like pork, beef, veal, kangaroo, lamb, all of that kind of stuff. Processed red meats is another thing that we often talk about in clinic. There's really, really strong evidence to show that processed meat isn't really good for our health. So something that we would really recommend that you're having, rarely. Again, it's not about completely cutting things out and never being able to enjoy them, but it's important to be empowered with the knowledge of how different things can affect your overall health. So the processed meats include ham, bacon, prosciutto, sausages, hot dogs, as seen on here. The next thing to consider is grass or grain-fed meats. So I'm just going to take a drink of water. So if you've got the means, choosing something that's grass-fed can be good because it has an overall better fat profile. Sorry. And more fat-soluble vitamins and omega-6s as well. This said, sometimes it's not affordable or appropriate for us to choose grass-fed meats. So in the wider context of your trolley, it's certainly not something that we would prioritize. And it's definitely okay to choose just regular meat as well. There's not too much of a difference in terms of the nutritional component there. So next, let's talk about fish. Fish gets our Trolley Star Award. Really great in terms of omega-3s, especially the oily fish, so salmon, mackerel, sardines, anti-inflammatory, they're heart protective, great for our brain function, health, joint health, all of that kind of stuff. They also aren't super high in saturated fats or anything, so really, really good option when we're looking to optimize our health for the long term. So our recommendation for fish is aiming for a couple of serves per week, which can be a really good substitution if you're trying to cut back on your red meat intake. In terms of mercury, that's often something that comes up when we talk about fish. The idea is to increase your variety of fish from just enjoying tuna. Again, nothing wrong with tuna. It's a really good source of protein, and especially canned tuna, which is naturally lower in mercury, that can be a really good option. But the idea is not to have too much. So overconsumption of any food can cause imbalances in our diet. So it's all about enjoying things in moderation. So moving on from our fish, let's talk about our legumes. Another trolley star for us. So really great meat alternative. And as I said before, if we're considering our fruit veg as a rainbow, the legumes are really the pot of gold beneath that. So legumes, when I say that, I'm talking about chickpeas, kidney beans, butter beans, cannellini beans, black beans, all of those lovely beans. They're really high in fibre, protein, iron, vitamin C, folate, lots of antioxidants, really, really good bang for your buck if you're looking to shift towards more of a plant-based diet. And the other thing is legumes are really rich in prebiotics, which is what feeds the probiotic gut flora that we have within our body. So really, really important to keep enjoy those within our diet as well. I do have a video based around probiotics, but I think in terms of time, we'll move on just to ensure that I can answer all of the questions that you have for me. So let's jump into talking about eggs. Another really good meat alternative. However, eggs really have been through the ringer in the nutrition world. So we've gone from wondering, are they good for us? Are they high in cholesterol? How many can I have a week? Can I have 2? Can I have 6? And there's even been a new study recently to show that perhaps we should be reducing our intake of eggs as well. So part of the reason at OnCore why we don't love the food pyramid is because the time that it takes to put together the nutrition research for all the people, all the important people within the government to be across it. Sorry, apologies. It takes a long time to kind of get across all of this scientific information, and by the time we get up to speed there, normally it's progressed. So important to know that's why we're not big proponents of the food pyramid. However, the dietitians, so at OnCore, we are committed to staying at the forefront of nutrition research. So we know good quality science, we know bad quality science, we know how to look at specific studies with a critical eye and estimate or assess whether it's appropriate or not. So, for example, that study that I mentioned before around perhaps we need to reduce the amount of eggs that we're enjoying, it actually illustrated that eggs are good for our health. They're good at raising the HDL cholesterol, which is the cholesterol we know we want higher. And in fact, this research showed that it didn't raise the LDL, which is the one that we want lower, for most people. So yes, the caveat there is the research found that people who have type 2 diabetes were more predisposed to having their LDL levels increase when enjoying eggs, but the cap was six a week, so still a decent amount that you can enjoy. The other thing, or the other reason why it's important to be going to people with a good understanding of nutrition and nutrition science is there's another study that I looked at for this presentation, and it was around it's a case study around a gentleman who was 85 years old, and he regularly consumed 25 eggs per day. And the case study illustrated that he was actually very fit, very healthy. He had a great cholesterol profile. So always important to take things with a grain of salt, but apply them appropriately to the individual as well. So the next thing that we're going to move on to is the checkout. And just like when you walk in, the end of your journey is a sea of temptation. So Coles and Woolies know really well that when there's a big line, when it's stressful trying to get everyone to social distance, when you're exhausted and it's that supermarket run after work, it's really, really easy to, pop in some candy bars or pop in something that maybe you wouldn't usually buy to help soothe that feeling of extra stress. So the recommendations we have around here is that, sometimes it's going to be okay to enjoy that candy bar and to enjoy that discretionary food. However, we want to be choosing to not have it on most occasions. So usually going through the self-serve checkout, unless you're really keen to have a bit of a chat to the checkout chick, can be just a good way to kind of try and reduce a little bit of that temptation as well. So in terms of our journey, we have reached the end. So these are some details about the organisation that I work for, OnCore Nutrition. We do work across a number of clinics, and I'm here in Keys, South Melbourne on Tuesdays. Also, as you would understand, I'm really well versed in telehealth and those kind of consultations as well. So now I'd love to take some questions. I can see that you've been popping them in the chat. So I'm going to start off with, okay, so Carly asked around, are sweet potatoes lower GI than regular potatoes? Great question, and yes, so sweet potatoes are lower in GI than regular potatoes. So that might be a good option as well. Sandy's asking about, what about estrogens in soy? So Sandy, I think that the estrogens in soy, the research around that, we know behave a little differently in our bodies to what they would if we were having human estrogen. But there are other considerations that we look at often with people with breast cancer or hormone therapy. There are a couple of other considerations to take into account here, but general population enjoying soy, the estrogens are totally acceptable. So you can enjoy your tofu in peace. So Sandy asked around fish and microplastics and the effects on the body. This is a really good question, and I'm going to write that down because, to be honest, I don't know a lot about microplastics. I know that in terms of where you get your fish from, that can be really important in terms of the load that you will get from the fish that you enjoy, but probably an area for me to look into more. So sorry, I know that's not a very satisfying answer, but yeah, really appreciate the good question. So Carly asked, which legumes are better for lower GI? So in terms of legumes, they're all really a low GI option, especially with our diet. We don't really want to look at the most extreme in terms of the lowest glycemic index food. It's more about what you're pairing with it and your overall diet. But legumes in general are considered low GI and would be a really good nutrient-rich option to include in your diet. Now, Bill has asked about sourdough, which if you're in lockdown at the moment, you might be jumping in and getting a little bit better with your baking. But sourdough is a good carbohydrate. In terms of, is it as good as wholemeal? So it's not as low on the glycemic index as wholemeal bread is, with the caveat that most sourdough that we buy from the store is a white sourdough. So if the sourdough is made with wholemeal flour, that would be a really good option in terms of, it's a great fermented food. So you're getting a really good array of those important prebiotics. But it could, if it's just the stock standard plain white sourdough, it's going to be a little higher on the glycemic index. So really with that question, I guess it's just down to what you enjoy, but a good question to maybe ask your baker, or if you're making it yourself, up the percentage of wholemeal flour you're putting in. So Janet asked, is there any problem with having a high fruit breakfast, i.e. sugar in the morning? No problem with having fruit at breakfast at all. I guess in terms of what you class as high fruit could be a bit tricky there. So our recommendations, as I mentioned, we say 2 pieces of fruit a day. But if you're having that at brekkie, that would be absolutely fine. So there's no research to say that having fruit at breakfast would be negative in any way. I guess I'd be looking to pair it with something like a fiber-rich carbohydrate and a bit of protein, just to really round out that brekkie a little bit more, and ensure that you're not hungry a couple hours later as well. So I apologize if I'm butchering your lovely name, but I think it's Catalin, has asked, should calorie intake change as we age? So great question. In terms of calorie intake, we actually have greater nutrient requirements as we age. However, our appetite tends to dull a little bit. So in terms of calorie intake, at OnCore, we don't really deal specifically with like calorie counting and that kind of thing. Instead, we more focus on nutrient content and your appetite as well. So I suppose if you found that you're enjoying a good variety of foods and your appetite's pretty good, as in you're feeling pretty satiated throughout the day, I'd say that would be appropriate, but could be a bit more of a specific answer needed there. So that I guess as a blanket statement, I would say that calorie intake might have to change as we age, but it's really down to the individual, your needs, and your unique circumstances. So Bufana said, another aisle that you see in the supermarket is nutraceuticals. Would you recommend people supplement their diet with nutraceuticals if you have allergies or don't like certain foods? So you're right, the nutraceutical supplement aisle is insane nowadays, really, chock full of lots and lots of different supplements. In terms of that within our practice, we recommend that people, if they have a specific deficiency, then supplementation is recommended. But as an overall blanket statement, a lot of these nutrients we can get within our diet. So if you're someone that's enjoying a wide, varied diet, there's likely no need that you'll need to have additional supplements outside of that, because you'll be enjoying or getting the requirements that you need from what you're already eating. And that's kind of our first line, is trying to put that nutrient or give that nutrient to the person through their diet, and then adding in those supplements or nutraceuticals as that kind of second wave of defense. So Sean, hi Sean, my simple understanding is that veggie oils aren't good for you, let alone trans fats, palm oils, etc. Is there a simple way of knowing what to avoid? It all seems to be labeled veggie oils on the ingredients labels. That is so true. And look, the oils that we have in our supermarket, again, it's a lot of choice and really hard to distinguish between them as well. So what we usually recommend is using a good quality extra virgin olive oil. We know that it has really great heart protective qualities, rich in omega-3s, so a really good source of mono and polyunsaturated fats as well. So I would recommend making the switch from your canola or the veggie-based oils to an olive oil. And Sean also asked about meat-free meals. There's a lot of pre-formed, pre-made processed meals out there at home. How do we know that how do we know the good from bad? Some have a lot of salts, veggie oils, processing, and vary widely in price and nutrient content? Better off cooking from scratch, or is there a simple way here? Again, great question. So there has been a lot of these, a huge proliferation of these products within our shelves. You hit the nail on the head, really. There are some that are really good. A lot of them can be quite processed. So if you think of like mock meats and things, they can be pretty processed. So usually we kind of recommend, if there's something you enjoy, sure, enjoy them in moderation. But kind of same rules apply for everything else. We would prefer kind of making things from scratch, or if you're looking on the ingredients list at the back, ensuring that you know most of the ingredients. The ingredients list isn't too long, and it's yeah, again, all things that you recognize. So kind of things that are more whole foods rather than the ultra processed stuff. Rod has asked, is there a lot of difference between raw or roasted cooked nuts as a snack between meals? So in terms of nuts, our recommendation is usually raw nuts is our like gold star. Roasted nuts usually have additional fat added to them to get that beautiful golden roasty toasty kind of color on them. So nuts themselves are quite high in fat already. It's the good kind of fat, so it's poly and monounsaturated, but I would recommend choosing the unsalted, untoasted, or the raw nuts as your snack of choice between meals. And also around limiting daily intake of nuts and seeds. So as I mentioned before, nuts and seeds are really important within our diet and great for a whole host of things. So in terms of like the recommendations for a limit or an enjoyable amount, usually about 30 grams of nuts. That can vary from like nut to nut, and probably the same of seeds. But to be honest, it's unlikely that you'd be overdoing it. So it's certainly something that you can enjoy in your diet without too much worry about overdoing it. Bhavana's asked around white meat intake. Yes. So the 500 grams doesn't include chicken, turkey, fish. So those options are things that you can enjoy more frequently. The 500 grams is really just around that red meat based on the current research as well. So I'll jump into the Q&A as well. Beautiful. Okay, so Sean, thank you for putting your answers there, and I've answered those. And then Fiona, so can diet or nutrition assist with menopause? Look, menopause is a really, really milestone moment in a woman's life. There is often a lot happening, especially dependent on what symptoms you're experiencing and everything else going on. The other thing that we know with menopause is it can cause a little bit of change in our body composition as well. So there's a hell of a lot going on. But certainly I have a number of clients that are going through menopause that I support to ensure they're enjoying a lovely variety of foods. And sometimes it can be around weight management and that kind of thing. But most of the time, there's just counseling and support that I provide my patients with to help them kind of get through this new stage or enjoy this new stage of their life as well. So short answer, yes, there are plenty of things that we can help with there. So the last question we have in here is from, sorry, I've just got a number as your name, but what about wheat-free and dairy-free and needing high protein? Great question. So wheat and dairy, so dairy does provide a good amount of protein, but wheat doesn't too much. So in terms of those being your nutrient requirements, you would certainly be able to enjoy a number of different high protein sources like legumes or meats or even some kind of dairy-free alternatives. So it's certainly able to still meet your nutrition requirements with those restrictions as well. Okay, so in terms of, and I'll jump back in. Thank you, Pravan. I've got a question about spices. So apart from chilies, can you eat too many spices? Spices are great for our health. So really rich in antioxidants, especially turmeric. So if you've heard the buzz around turmeric being anti-inflammatory and all of that stuff, it's really true. The caveat there is that you do have to have quite a bit of it to get that active ingredient of curcumin to play a part within your diet. But really, the sky is the limit. Enjoy as many spices as your palate likes, and can be very, very health and heart protective in the long term as well. So certainly no need to skip on the flavor there. Okay, so in terms of, were there any other questions or anything anyone wanted to ask me while we're here? Great. Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you persevering through the tech difficulties, but I hope that you've had a really lovely day. And if you feel after this talk that you might need a little bit of one-on-one assistance, I would be very, very happy to help any of you. So feel free to jump onto our website. There's a way that you can book in. We have a free 15-minute consult, which is really just an opportunity for you to